There were some fascinating games in the London Chess Classic, and I want to show you this last round encounter between Hans Niemann and Domraju Gukesh. Now, Gukesh really wanted to go for it in this game because he still has a chance to qualify for the Candidates Tournament in 2024. So a win was necessary here. Hans Niemann, well, he's usually pretty ambitious, so this one was guaranteed to be a good fight. Now, it's a gioco piano, so that keeps a lot of tension on the board. No exchanges, and probably Gukesh would have been happy with that. Just got an interesting position on the board, basically. A lot of symmetry so far, but things starting to... the players starting to go their separate ways. I mean, these move orders are very, very subtle, but basically White wants to gain some space. I should say that Niemann earlier in the tournament won a very nice game against Shreyas Royal with the gioco piano, so yeah, he knows what he's doing here. And now we see Gukesh starting to rev up on the king side. So he plays h6, this move that often I'm very critical of, but he has a very positive idea in mind. Niemann continues gaining space on the queen side, seems very mysterious, but there can often be a good point to this. Perhaps in the endgame, sometimes even in the middle game. Right, here is why Gukesh wasn't castling. He wanted to go for it straight away with g5. Now, on this channel, I've discussed this g-pawn advance quite a lot over the past few months. We've seen some really nice games played by Magnus Carlsen with White, where he actually provoked this move by playing the bishop to g5, and it was driven around here. So this is a little bit different, as the bishop is on c1. Obviously really aggressive. Black wants to push forward. I've mentioned, well, we've seen that very often it's a really nice plan for White to bring this queen's knight either to g3 or to e3 to look at that weakened f5 square. This is the drawback. When you advance pawns, they leave squares beside them or behind them that are weaker, and in particular f5. So what about knight d2? This wasn't played, but I think this is very typical of the kind of things that can go on. The problem for White is that g4 is possible. The knight hasn't got a good retreat, it has to go to h4, and a couple of things possible. Knight takes, this is hanging, and Black has won a pawn. Now, this is certainly not clear because White definitely has compensation there, but yeah, perhaps not so desirable. And the other thing that Black can do is play the knight to h7. So threatening the knight comes in, that can be exchanged. d5 pushes the bishop back, queen h4, threatening this. Watch out for that bishop in the corner. Queen e2 protects, and now castles queenside. Well, that looks like good fun for Black. King seems pretty safe at the moment. Nice centre. Very aggressive pieces here. So I can understand why Hans didn't want to go for the traditional knight d2 and knight f1. See, every position is slightly different. You have to judge it on its own merits. He played bishop e3. I think it's a very natural move to exchange off that dangerous bishop in the corner. Gukesh ploughed on with the g-pawn. And once again, there's a problem with putting the knight on h4. That's the square I would like the knight to go to. But after the exchange, knight takes, and then queen takes knight. So the knight came back to d2. Gukesh exchanged. Now, I mean, not sure which is best here, actually. Niemann went for pawn takes, which does open the f-file, which could be useful. You could also play rook takes sort of keeps white's king maybe a little bit safer, but it's hard to say which is best. But Niemann went for f takes e3. And I suppose that's the most dynamic, considering that white may be able to use that f-file. Knight h7. So that allows the queen to step over to the king side. Knight f1, where we've seen this maneuver before. Clears the d2 square, so this knight can join in perhaps. But basically the knight wants to come to g3. That's a key square in this line, looking at f5. h5, knight g3, and queen g5. Okay, good move. Covering the f5 square, but also looking at e3. Knight d2, yep. Time to bring some pieces into the game. Now here's an interesting moment. Gukesh plays knight e7. Hard to say what's best here, but castles looks like the most prudent. But knight e7 played, well, I sort of understand that. It's covering the f5 square, another piece on f5. So here's my first question for you. If you were white, how do you play in this position? I really like the way that Niemann plays in this next phase, actually. This is very interesting. So white to play, I'll have a drink, you have a think. White to play, what would you do next? And why? The why is quite important in this case. Cheers. White to play, are you ready? You can always pause the vid if you want. Queen a4 check. Excellent move. Okay, what's the point? If bishop d7, the natural move to block the check, then white has bishop takes pawn check, winning a pawn. Okay, that's fine. Well, why can't black just block it? Well, that's what Gukesh did. But then queen b4, and that's a little bit uncomfortable for black. Not only is the queen looking at b7, I mean that's covered at the moment, but it's that d6 pawn. That's a sensitive spot. So this rather distracts black from the kingside initiative. And just for a moment, you know, black's pieces are a little bit awkwardly placed. That knight would like to move to g5, but that's the square's taken by the queen. And the king is still in the middle, not clear where it's going. Anyway, Gukesh pushed on with the h-pawn. Now, don't go backwards. Forwards. Here we go. Gukesh exchanged off with the bishop. You could play knight takes. And then d5. And the bishop comes back. But, you know, that queen can come in here. That's a little bit unpleasant for black. The king is stuck in the middle. You know, perhaps d4 or e4, or maybe even e4 might come. You've got to watch out for that knight. It's a tricky position for black to play. I think it's much easier for white to play this one. In any case, Gukesh exchanged with the bishop. And then played d5. That one was threatened. Now this one is threatened as well, actually. Bishop dropped back. And this is another tricky position. I'm going to flip the board and ask you, how do you play with black here? Black to play, what would you do? I think this is a much more difficult position for black to play than white, actually. Even though at the moment this looks very attractive. Bishop is blocked out for the moment. But this is a bit annoying. The queen is certainly on a nice square. But black to play, what would you do here? Well, Gukesh played castle's kingside, and that's certainly a mistake. Castle's queenside is very interesting. The computer thinks this is the best move. I mean, it's very tricky. After bishop d1, looking at that pawn, I wouldn't feel entirely comfortable. It's actually a very nice move, threatening the pawn. If rook g8, then knight b3, and the knight comes in here, and obviously this is a really dangerous attack. But instead of rook g8, it is possible to take this, and we've just got a really unclear position, although black's king could be better placed. Okay, let's go back. I'll flip the board round again. Castles. Okay, now what? What did Niemann do next? White to play. I've got loads of questions for you today. White to play. Why is castle's kingside a dubious move? Rook a4, what a beautiful idea. The rook sweeps across the board. Well, we saw this in Michael Adams' game, actually, against Bartel, where he played a4 and then rook a3, and the rook swept across the third rank. So this is one of the ideas of advancing the rook's pawn. It gains space, and that could conceivably allow you to bring the rook into the game from the side of the board. This is highly unpleasant because this pawn is under fire. Really difficult for black to defend against this. So for example, if knight f6 defends the pawn but loses that one. What about king h8? This is tremendous for white. Queen takes. Okay, black gets that pawn. But e4 is really unpleasant. This brings all white's pieces into the game. So for example, after pawn takes and rook takes, so this one is threatened. If f6, rook f1 hits that one, rook takes, and actually white simply has a really strong attack here, apart from the extra pawn. But these pieces look superb. Rook g3 coming, maybe rook h3 as well. Very, very good position for white. It must be winning. Gukesh played instead g3. But that allows queen takes. So we've got an endgame. And then pawn takes pawn check. Rook takes. Now, white is a pawn up. Okay, that's pleasant. Okay, why not knight takes pawn? This didn't happen. But why not? Well, again, this move e4 is really disruptive for black. Let's say pawn takes, rook takes, and this is an incredibly strong attack. I mean, this is really a lesson in why one shouldn't advance pawns too early. When you advance the h and g pawns, there is a problem. It could be that your king gets terribly exposed, and this is a wonderful attack. So for example here, and that's going to be the end of that. Therefore Gukesh did not take on f5, so he played f6. And after e4, well, white is just a pawn up, but not only that, I mean, this is really nasty for black. Bishop in a superb position on b3. Knight f3. Rook g7. Those knights are terrible. Niemann exploited the poor position of the knights with d4. Just opens things up absolutely beautifully. All white's pieces are in play. Pawn takes pawn. E takes d4, I should say. Knight takes d4. Well, look at this knight coming in here. Knight g5. Well, at least that knight has found some kind of square. But it's hopeless. E takes d5. That opens up the e file. Knight takes. Rook h6. Really nice move. Attacking f6. Everything just rolls beautifully now. King f7 defends. King f1, that's a tidy move. Basically, if the knight moves in this position, then there's still knight f3. So just steps out of the g-file, out of danger, and then white can go forward again and actually Niemann is in complete control here. It's a pawn up, but it's not just that. The pieces are absolutely superb. Rook g8. Now, there's a few ways to win this one, but this is very clean. c4 pushes the knight away. c5 check. Knight has to block again. Bishop takes, pawn takes. And now after this next move, Gukesh resigned. Knight e6. Very clean finish. So that rook is trapped on g7. Therefore, knight takes is necessary. And then rook takes. And the two rooks threaten the f6 pawn. Nothing that black can do about it. So, for example, if rook takes g2, you take here, and king takes rook. And, well, I don't know, let me see. Rook f8, can take here. Put the rook on b6. White is 2 pawns up. The rook is beautifully placed here, and yeah, these pawns look superb. Completely winning position for white. I think crucial thing in these kind of situations, can the black king activate? Well, no, because it won't be able to step across this line, and white can just build up very steadily and completely dominates the position. Really like that game. I liked the way Niemann made the best of this position. Putting the queen on b4, really nice. You know, he kept playing actively. I mean, Hans is a mercurial character. He really goes for it in his games and sometimes has amazing results, just like in Zagreb before the London Chess Classic. But when you give so much energy, then sometimes it means you have real dips. And he looked tired in the London Chess Classic, actually. I mean, he finally finished on 50%. But we saw in his game against Bartel how he had a winning position and obviously missed a tactic and threw it away. He also got crushed in one Berlin. He also made a few steady draws with the Berlin. Didn't have the usual energy, and I suspect that's a kind of, well, he just couldn't sustain it after his Zagreb result. But he did win a couple of nice games against Shreyas Royal and this game as well, which I thought were very good. Unlucky for Gukesh, who really went for it in this last game, but maybe this strategy with h6 and g5 is just a bit too rash. A bit too obvious and made it easy for a player like Niemann to counterattack. But he still finished on 5 out of 9, which is a pretty good score. Hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.